there's one thing, sir, we agree with. Life is way too good to waste on bad ideas. There is no doubt about that fact. And so your book is a bad idea. It's not factual. And in fact, it's nonsense.
Hello, welcome to Ask an Atheist. I'm your host, Liz Cavell, one of FFRF's 10 attorneys, and that was Greg Locke, a Tennessee preacher who would rather burn a book than read it.
And I'm Andrew Seidel, and that was my book.
Yes, so we're gonna get into this story of anti-intellectualism and book burning today. Mostly we want to hear from you, so if you've got questions or comments, you can please put them right here in the Facebook comments below, or you can send an email to askanatheist@ffrf.org. So, Andrew, a preacher burned your book. How did that happen?
So I was watching the Democratic debate back at the end of July, and I saw this ad for a movie about rich people hunting poor people. And everybody on Twitter was talking about the movie when I signed on. I think Universal Studios got so much blowback from it that they actually pulled the movie. And I don't know whether it's no longer being released or whether they're going to release it later, but I thought, man, that's really quite an impact. We should try to run one of our ads, our Ron Reagan ad, on a Democratic debate.
Right, but that did not happen.
No,
right?
It didn't happen. Annie Laurie and our team actually tried to get the Ron Reagan ad on the next debate, which was, I believe, September. It was on ABC, and
right.
ABC censored it. They said, no
Yeah,
way.
It's really unbelievable. This always boggles my mind because the ad we're talking about is really quite tame.
It really is.
But it has to be like the most censored ad on TV now because we've been refused several times. ABC said no, would not air it during the September debate. ABC even censored our totally uncontroversial JFK ad. So
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Sensitive over there.
Yeah, no Ron Reagan, no JFK, not on ABC at least, but CNN was a different story.
Right, so CNN agreed to run the FFRF ad during the October debate. And just so everyone understands what caused all the controversy, here's the ad.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to support the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics, working to keep state and church separate, just like our founding fathers intended. Please support the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
Oh, so I know what you're thinking. That's the most explosive thing you've ever seen on TV in prime time. That is the ad. That's it. Ron Reagan Jr. saying he's an atheist and that he's not afraid of hell. Those two things are what get this ad censored so often.
I mean, it's really amazing. It's just the mere existence of atheists and the fact that we are unafraid of their God. It really triggers some of these Christian snowflakes.
Yeah, so it's angered all the right people. Rush Limbaugh talked about it on his show for quite a while. We had Bill Donahue of the Catholic League.
Hey guys, Pastor Greg Locke here.
He's back.
Who just wrote 900 words covering every one of FFRF's ads from throughout our past, which was nice and appreciated, even though he didn't intend it to be. And here you're seeing some of those articles talking about our ad that aired during the CNN debate.
Yeah, it really made a splash. And I knew that the ad was going to run. Obviously, we all did. So I was on Twitter that night, and I actually saw the ad trending on Twitter, and I saw Ron Reagan become the most searched Google term, the #1 term during the debate. So it had this huge impact, and it was nearly all positive for FFRF. And while I was on Twitter, I was also sparring with the few people who didn't like it.
That doesn't sound like Twitter. So that included Greg Locke. So that brings us to Pastor Locke. I'm just going to read what he said about the ad on Twitter. So the FFRF running an ad during the Democratic debate is further proof that this party hates God. These people will destroy the very fabric of this nation. Furthermore, they lied about our founding fathers.
Yeah, so
I guess that's where we said our founding fathers, or where Ron says our founding fathers intended for religion and government to be separate.
Yes, and so a bunch of FFRF supporters saw that tweet. One of them tagged me in the response and asked Locke, have you even read The Founding Myth? And I responded kind of half jokingly at the time saying, maybe I'll send Locke a copy of my book. And then Locke responded. He said something kind of incomprehensible about signing my book and mailing it back to me. And I was sitting there in the office the next day, and I thought, you know what? I am going to send him a copy. This is a guy who really clearly needs to understand the facts and arguments in this book. He could use it. So I'm going to send him a copy. So I wrote a little inscription, and we mailed it off to him.
Right. So here's how he responded.
Hey guys, Pastor Greg Locke here. So last week, the Freedom from Religion Foundation ran an ad during the Democratic debate that sparked a lot of controversy. I said something about it, and of course, they shot back, as well as one of their head attorneys, a man by the name of Andrew Seidel, that wrote a book called The Founding Myth: Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American. He smarted off in the tweet and said, maybe I'll send you a copy. I told him, go right ahead. Well, certainly he did. A couple of things before I talk about the nonsense that's contained in this very unfactual book, and that is, it's not Freedom from Religion Foundation, because atheism is not only a religion, it's one of the fastest growing religions in the world. They believe in religion just as much, if not more, than I do, because it takes more faith for them to believe in the beginning dirt and nothing than it does for me to believe in the beginning God. But that's neither here nor there. Okay, a person trying to write a book on the history of America without God is utter fabricated nonsense. An atheist writing the history of America is like Planned Parenthood writing a manual on how to take care of infants. There is no history of America without God. If that bothers you and chaps your hide, then you probably need to study just a little bit more. But in this book on the myth of the founding fathers not being Christian whatsoever, here's what Mr. Seidel says. Mr. Locke, there is still time to better your life. Even homophobic bigots and wife beaters can change. Let go of your hatred and fear. There is no God, and that's okay. This is not a Christian nation, and that's a good thing. Be better. Read something other than your Bible. Life is too good to waste on bad ideas. Well, there's one thing, sir, we agree with. Life is way too good to waste on bad ideas. There is no doubt about that fact. And so your book is a bad idea. It's not factual. And in fact, it's nonsense.
Cool. A book burning right here in the United States. And it was a preacher. And there were quite a few media stories about the book being burned. Obviously, this hit social media, including a story from God, a comedic Twitter character, not a non-existent deity. So there's God's Twitter feed there. Which was great. So he read the inscription that you wrote in the book there. What was that about? How'd you come up with the inscription?
So the inscription, we get a lot of mail at FFRF. I actually just got a book about 30 minutes before we went to air on this. Another preacher, I got him booted out of a public school in Florida where he was a football chaplain. He sent me a copy of the book he wrote about that experience. I'm not going to burn it, believe it or not. And it has a nice inscription in the front. I've gotten Bibles before that they have these heartfelt inscriptions. We also get the other end of the spectrum where we get this, really, really hateful mail. And so I was kind of trying to mimic one of those, sort of inscriptions in the Bible, savior type things. And I was a little bit cheeky, as you could hear in his thing, but there was some heartfelt thoughts in there, and I thought it might be better received if I mimicked one of these Bible things that we get all the time. Apparently not.
I don't think it worked.
No, it didn't work.
So it's kind of a weird thing having seeing your book being burned there. How did that make you feel?
It was very, very strange. I mean, I said we had filmed a news bite about this, and I I looked on it with the horror that all thinking people feel when they see a book being burned, with all the historical connotations that has. I mean, this isn't the same type of situation, but I mean, so there's sort of horror, there's this revulsion, the kind of the rubbernecking, you know, morbid curiosity. But then I am kind of quite proud. I mean, this book was so threatening to Greg Locke that instead of dealing with any of the issues contained in the book, he just set about burning it. He talks regularly. I mean, he said it in the on Twitter, and he said it in that video. You know, it's afactual. It's all nonsense, all this kind of stuff. But he never can point to a single thing in the book that is wrong. Instead, he just lights it on fire with a blowtorch.
Yeah, it kind of must feel like darkly good. You know, kind of a lot of the good.
A badge of honor type thing.
Well, you're in really good company. A lot of the good books and good authors get censored and burned. J.K. Rowling and Kurt Vonnegut and Voltaire and H.G. Wells and Nabokov and even Anne Frank had their books burned. So yay. Most of them were free thinkers, probably no coincidence. And of course, religion often motivates biblioclasm, which we learned was an actual word that exists to talk about or to describe destroying, burning books. We know religions have a history of burning the books of other religions. I guess you'd probably feel differently if this wasn't just a lone preacher kind of playing for the camera in his driveway, because obviously there's a terrifying anti-intellectual history of book burning. You know, authoritarian, you know, people burning books are usually the bad guy on the wrong side of history, the fascists, the totalitarians, and worse, that have burned books throughout history.
Yeah, I mean, and you see it even in fiction. I mean, in 1984, in Fahrenheit 451, and they do it to project this strength, but really they're showing how weak they are. You know, I don't see a strong, confident man in that video. I see this scared little boy who's confronted with ideas that he doesn't like, that challenge him. And so instead of thinking about those ideas, he tries to burn them away.
Right. Well, I'm sure viewers have some questions and comments, so I'm going to get to it and see if we've got any comments here.
Yeah, it's not like it's a controversial topic or anything, so I don't think that many people have waited.
So this is great because this is from Twitter this morning for the show promo from none other than Pastor Greg Locke.
Oh, okay.
It's a comment more than a question, and it says, "You guys are really getting some publicity out of this deal. Let the record show I've challenged this group to a public debate at least 4 times. FFRF is interested in propaganda, not dialogue," says the guy who, when confronted with ideas that challenge his worldview, he lights them on fire. What do you think about that? Have you been challenged to a public debate at least 4 times?
I don't know if it's been 4 times. He did say on Twitter a couple times, you know, set up the debate, Seidel, things like this.
Interesting.
But I mean, we had the debate, right? Like, I gave him a set of ideas that he could have rebutted, a set of arguments, a set of facts. I mean, there are like 1,300 citations in my book, I think, almost. You know, and instead of engaging on those or offering any dialogue whatsoever, he lit them on fire. I mean, he lost the debate already. I don't see what's to be gained. Now, if he wants to go out and buy a copy of the book and actually read it and engage on the ideas, I will talk with him about setting up a debate. But until he does that, I mean, he's already lost the debate.
So Susan Peters says, I should have read this first. Shouldn't he be ticketed for deliberately setting a fire this close to a wooded area? Super sensitive topic. Luckily, he's in Tennessee.
I mean, it is a little irresponsible. And there's also the issue with him using AC/DC on his video. You know, I don't think AC/DC would appreciate. I know they're pretty rebellious, but I don't think they're into the book burning.
The bells tolling were on the video?
Yeah,
I thought that was
bells.
in my mind.
Yeah.
So here we go. Betty J. Conklin comments, I'm a Christian and I've never heard of this book until now, so the negative attention with the book burning is turning out to be beneficial. I bought 2 copies to prove that Greg Locke does not represent all Christians. We appreciate that comment.
I do.
It's not really a personal affront to Christians that our nation is secular and not Christian. It actually is equally neutral across all religions. It's great for all of us that we have a secular founding, and the genius of our nation is that we are founded as a completely non-theocratic, non-religion nation state. That means that we all get to live out our personal conscience the way we see fit.
Yeah. So was that Betty? Was that her name?
Yeah.
So I mean, and the reason that Betty and Locke can have such different brands of Christianity that they adhere to, apparently, is because there is no freedom of religion without a government that is free from religion. It's because we have that secular government that they can both be Christians in such divergent ways. Betty, thank you for buying the book. I appreciate that. 2 copies in particular. Would love for all your friends to do the same.
David Steketty, who is an FFRF supporter and plaintiff in one of our cases.
The First Amendment. Yes, he is.
Asks a very helpful question. Do you ever wonder if the deckled edges caused the book to burn faster? I think that was the blowtorch that was handy.
I mean, I'm now that I'm thinking about the physics of it, I imagine David is right. I am not going to be the one to do a study of that, however, David. Don't.
Yeah. Chris Sakura says, how do you keep your cool so easily when someone is acting crazy, like burning a book? That kind of gets to what we were talking about earlier, which is there's something actually kind of disturbing about like seeing somebody really, I don't know. I don't know what's going through the mind of supporters of Pastor Locke when they see something like that, but I have to think there's something, I don't know, really kind of troubling and maybe violent or just kind of gross about seeing someone burn a book with glee.
No, you're absolutely right. You know, we are a country founded on dialogue and on reasoned debate, and to inject that kind of violence into it, as Locke did, and shut it down immediately is alarming. And it would be different. You know, this is just this lonely guy in the woods playing for the camera with his blowtorch out of his garage. The scarier thing for me was how many people were on his page on Twitter responding to this video saying, supporting this, and you should burn that book and things like that. Now, far more people were saying things like, wow, I did not see that coming, as in Nazis, and responding with pictures of the 1933 book burnings and things like that. But the fact that there were a solid chunk of people who were supporting this is the terrifying part of this. You know, it's a slouching towards totalitarianism kind of thing.
Right. So there's kind of a trolling question, but I think we can take it for what it's worth.
I mean, the whole thing is trolling.
Donnie says, why do you want to just restrict the Christian religion, not say boo about other religions trying to enter our country and culture? So there's a lot to unpack there, but I think...
Yeah, xenophobia aside, I mean, this is a really common misunderstanding about what it means to have a secular government, right? A secular government is not a government that is hostile to any religions. It's a government that's neutral on religions. And I kind of like to describe it with an example. So we get complaints all the time about coaches praying with their football teams. I mean, we get 4,000 to 5,000 complaints a year, and I don't know, a decent chunk of those are about something like this. And, you know, if a coach says to the team, okay, kids, huddle up, go out there, we're going to win one for Jesus. He was our Lord and Savior. The Bible's right. You know, that's promoting Christianity. That's a problem. If a coach has the same kids huddle up and say, okay, guys, there is no God, go out there and, you know, we'll read Dawkins after we play and win. You know, that is a coach really pushing atheism. That is a problem. If a coach says, okay, guys, play as hard as you practiced, you know, and go out there and we'll win one. That's a coach being neutral about religion. They're not saying anything one way or the other. That is what a government that is neutral about religion looks like. That's a secular government, and that's why it allows every religion or no religion to flourish, because the government doesn't have its hand on the scales in any way, shape, or form.
Right. And I think part of that kind of speaks to this maybe deliberate or maybe just delusioned understanding of atheism as a religion, and the idea that, yes, we happen to be atheists, people who do not believe in supernatural gods, but working for a secular government that is free from religious promotion and religious bias is not, asking the government to push atheism. Then the absence of any religious position whatsoever, that is what our founders intended.
Exactly.
Whether you agree with that or like that or not, as Ron Reagan said in our ad, that is what our country is supposed to be. Our government is supposed to be religion free. That doesn't mean atheistic. Yes, like not believing in God. Right, exactly. Not believing in God and being religiously neutral. Both of those scenarios involve not constantly pushing God belief or Christianity, but that doesn't mean that saying nothing about religious belief one way or another is somehow hostile towards religious belief or Christianity or particular beliefs.
Yeah, and I think there is a second piece to why Christians feel like this. It's because they've grown accustomed to this unwarranted privilege. They're used to having government officials at least pay lip service to, if not directly promote their religion, and we fight to stop that. And you don't get to use a government position, government power to impose your personal religion on anybody else. And we are trying to take away that violation, which they see as a privilege and a right, wrongly. And so I think they see that it's that same thing where the move towards equality feels like persecution if you're privileged. And so that's part of the problem that we're seeing here too.
Right. And I mean, when we're talking about this topic, not this book burning topic, but the topic in the founding myth and the thing that Ron Reagan said on the ad that was so, that made people feel so upset, has to do with our government. It's not about, the founding of American government and our institutions. We're not talking about whether culturally, there's Christian influence in our culture. Or as Pastor Locke said, having not read your book, obviously, or I guess I'm assuming he didn't read it before he burned it.
Oh no, he definitely didn't read it. You could tell from what he said.
He talked about how your book says, wrongly that our founders were not Christians, which of course your book does not say. Many of our founders were Christians, many were deists, and many we don't necessarily understand what their religious beliefs might have been along that spectrum. But the point is not what were the personal religious beliefs of our founders, and your book makes that point if one reads it. When we're talking about the founding of American government and institutions, we're not talking about culture or the personal religious beliefs of individual people. We're talking about the genius of our government, which is it is not religious. It does not exist to promote or support one particular religion.
Yeah, and that was an original. I mean, that was a first. I mean, that was a historical first. No country had ever done that. And we have a government for and by and of we the people, not for, of, and by one particular religion, one particular religious group, or one particular God.
Right. I think there's one more, I think there's one more question here.
Well, you just raised one other thing too. I just want to say, going back to the debate, you mentioned something that struck this. None of the issues that Locke has raised, or really any Christian nationalist, are new. And he didn't, even in those short videos, say anything, and on Twitter, anything that I had not heard before and had not addressed in the book. So it's like he wants to have a debate about the answers to his questions are in the book that he burned.
So kind of off that topic, there's a question that was just added from John Gleason. Hey, Andrew, or probably Twitter, because it says, hey, Andrew L. Seidel. What was your expectation when you sent Greg Locke that book?
I don't really know. It happened so organically. I didn't expect him to burn it. I was hoping to maybe engage with him behind the scenes. I didn't realize how terribly unreasonable and vitriolic and, really violent. I mean, we already talked about the violence that is sort of inherent in book burning. He would be in response. I didn't necessarily think he was going to go into this with an open mind, but you never know. I mean, you really do never know. And I mean, this was not what I was expecting. That I can say.
Okay, so one more question from Andrew Hunt. How many generations, decades do you think it will take to bring reason to the United States?
Oh, we're
if this religion is growing, how are we doing demographically?
Oh, we're winning. I mean, look, we're winning right now. A lot of what you are seeing right now, you're seeing this massive Christian nationalist push to codify that religious privilege that we were just talking about into the law. And they're pushing so quickly right now because they are raging against the dying of their privilege. They're not going to go gently into the obsolescence for which they are bound. They can read the demographic studies as well as we can. They look out on Sunday mornings, and instead of seeing young smiling faces, they're seeing, bare wooden empty pews. They know what's coming, and they're doing as much damage as they can before that time arrives. And it's a lot of damage, but I think we're going to recover. It's just a question of how long it's going to take.
So you heard Pastor Locke in the video referring to atheism being a religion. Mm-hmm. One of the things that proves that in his mind is that it's the fastest growing religion in the U.S. And there's a tiny seed of truth in there, which is that the non-religious demographic, people who answer the question, what is your religion? People who answer that question with, none, or none of the above, or, I don't have a religion. That number of people is rapidly increasing.
Yes. As Christianity is in steep decline as well.
Right. And so in terms of demographics, we know that the American population, especially millennial and younger generations, are less and less religious, whatever that may mean. Not necessarily atheist or agnostic, although those groups are growing as well in identification. So we know that the American public is personally becoming, our culture is becoming more secular, more non-religious, less tied to, old dogmatic religions and church, institutions.
And we should say two more things on that point. One, it's people like Greg Locke who are driving some of that, right? His hatred, his bigotry, his book burning. I mean, that is the kind of thing that is going to drive anybody with any empathy whatsoever away from Christianity. So he's helping drive that exodus that he's lamenting. And the second thing is that I also think, if you look at the graphs, there are these two converging lines at some point farther out, and we don't know when they're going to converge as the nuns rise and as the Christians decrease. But I actually think there's going to be a tipping point somewhere where both of those are going to actually become steeper. Right now, the default is, most people will say I'm a Christian as a default because they think that to be a Christian is to be a good person. And nobody wants to say, well, yeah, I'm not a good person. And Christianity in America has done a marvelous job of convincing people that Christians are good people just by virtue of being Christian. And that's not true. And that's changing. And I think we're going to hit a point eventually where the default is going to be, oh, no, I'm not religious. And once that happens, I think the acceleration on those two trend lines is going to really just absolutely take off. And again, it's people like Greg Locke who are helping to drive that by showing that being a Christian does not mean being a good person and can often mean quite the opposite. It gives people a license to, in their minds, do terrible, awful, evil things like burn books.
Okay, well, on that note, let's just mention where and how to buy the book if you would like to read it or do something else with it.
It's available at fine bookstores everywhere. If people want a signed copy, they can get one on the FFRF website. So if you go to ffrf.org and shop, you can get a book through there. And if you there's a little place where you can write in the checkout page, I'd like Andrew to sign this book, and I will happily sign it and inscribe it if you like.
Is there an audio version?
There's an audio version. There's an ebook version. It's up on Audible. It's at Barnes and Nobles. I mean, everywhere you want to get it, there should be a copy. You can even go to libraries. Greg, libraries are these places where you can actually get books for free and read them. They don't let you burn them though, so don't do that. So you could get it from the library too.
Super.
Or you could buy one and donate it to the library.
Well, all good ideas. Thank you. That is our show for the week. Thanks for watching. Tune in next week, Wednesday at noon Central, for another episode of Ask an Atheist.